the E3 2018 presentation, there were two games that absolutely stood out to me and caught my attention. Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, which turned out to be my favorite game of last year, and probably one of my favorite games of all time. And the second one was sort of similar, Halo Infinite. Especially now that the grappling hook rumors are true. I mean, come on, guys! Oddly enough, Ghost of Tsushima really didn't grab my attention early on. The Japanese aesthetic was cool, and the way that the trailer saw you take out enemies so quickly was intriguing, but I knew next to nothing about it. Come May 14th of this year, and we were treated to a state of play presentation that showed us a little more of what the game was actually shaping up to be. And it absolutely looks like a good time, but I still had my reservations. It looked like another checklist game. You know exactly what I mean. One of the many variations of the homogenized open world game, where you incrementally go to marked locations on a map and maybe fight some enemies or climb a tall structure, then activate a switch or something, watch a cutscene, and then you have a portion of the map filled with smaller objectives to do. All the while, there are several side quests and errands for you to run while you avoid the main narrative's missions. There's nothing inherently wrong with this, by the way. I love lots of these games, but it's just something you and I have both played before. That's the impression I got from the previews, but with enough of a twist to make me want to hear them out. And Sucker Punch is one of those studios. You know the type, the kind you want to take to Olive Garden and grab some breadsticks with. But the stars just never aligned for me in Sucker Punch, especially Infamous. I mean, those games look so sweet, but I never got to try them out. Maybe I'll have a newfound appreciation for them after finishing today's topic of discussion and give those a try. So let's jump in. Oh, and it's not worth mentioning at all, but out of nowhere, a friend and coworker of mine just decided to get the game for me. So major shout outs to Big Bruce. I appreciate it endlessly, my guy. My birthday was in May, but I'm not gonna complain about this belated gift. But let's not delay any further. This is Ghost of Tsushima. If there's one thing that immediately hits you in the face when you start this game, it's the art direction. This game is what happens when strong artistic vision meets powerful tech. The visuals in this game are out of this world, and it's mostly due to the use of colorful foliage and dynamic lighting. It's worth noting that I'm playing this on a base model PS4, so my frame rate did get a little choppy towards the opening and final sequences. Surprisingly though, that was about the only times my frame rate tanked. It was consistently orbiting around 30 FPS for the remaining 20 hours I spent on Tsushima. The character models are good looking, nothing really above or below what we've seen from this generation of hardware. The lip sync is pretty atrocious though. I tended to just not focus on it after I noticed it the first few times, and thankfully there are plenty of other impressive things to focus on, like the convincing looking beads of sweat or tears, like all the other small details on the faces, or you can focus on these other set of cheeks you'll be looking at. I would say maybe 20% of the time the game will trip up and make you tilt your head in confusion, but that other 80% will be accompanied by breathtaking scenery and visuals, with plenty of traveling to facilitate it. My suspicions were true. This is definitely a checklist game. There's no doubt about that. But like I stated previously, that's not inherently a negative. The only reason I give this type of game a unique category is because I think it's interesting that it's become the AAA go-to template. But it doesn't come as a surprise to me in the slightest. It's the easiest kind of game to sell, not only to publishers but to a general audience. There are so many small objectives strewn across a large map that half of the fun is just walking around and accidentally finding stuff to do. And that stretches that game time too, which is always a good move for the higher-ups to see. It's also very easy to show progress in. Revealing the map as you travel across it is about as literal as you can get for displaying progress. On top of all the upgrades and new abilities you'll find through exploration, side quests, main quests, and other little distractions you can stumble upon. And all of those thousands of tasks can be tackled at whatever level of urgency the player sees fit. It's a virtually indestructible way of making a game, right? Well, what if you're the kind of player that just doesn't jive with that whole setup? Personally, it's not my preferred cup of tea. I won't waste my breath here, seeing as how I've said it before in countless other videos, but I just think much tighter experiences are able to be crafted in more linear games. I like for each level or area to house something unique from the other one before it. I would be more inclined to play a game with fewer levels that are of a higher concentration of content than an open world game with lots of little throwaway objectives that are a variation on a few of the same kinds of challenges. Not to mention it being a checklist game and all, I feel like I've played it already, with only the setting and names changing, but again, that's just me. And hey, that's not to say I didn't enjoy my time with Ghost of Tsushima. I quite liked it. Gameplay wise, I think this game's closest sibling is Shadow of Mordor. Its stealth systems feel very similar on a basic level, specifically in the way animations look and their durations. You even have the opportunity to brutalize enemy captains if you can get the drop on them. There are some items you can utilize to distract enemies in certain direction. Yeah, you hear that, Sekiro? Crazy fucking concept, I know. You can upgrade and unlock new abilities too, but I gotta be real, I was really unimpressed with the upgrades. The only notable upgrades for the stealth sections are being able to assassinate more than one person at one time. Everything else was pretty much just bought out of boredom and because nothing else caught my attention. To be fair, there isn't too much to add to just sneaking around and stabbing dudes in a realistic setting, but there could be some way to give Jin more acrobatics maybe, like a silent sprint that could turn into a silent tackle at the end of the tree, taking enemies out really quickly if you're good enough. I don't know. And those upgrades being weak don't just apply to the stealth. It also applies to the combat. Swordplay is pretty satisfying. You have all the basics you would hope for, a light attack, heavy attack, block, dodge, and a parry. But where things get interesting are your different stances. There are 4 stances that unlock the more you do missions and grow your legend, basically an experience meter with a small tie to the narrative, nothing we haven't seen before, but the stances can be used freely. But they also have very limited use when not against its intended weakness. Each of those 4 stances have an archetype of enemy they're meant to counter, as well as coming with their own skill trees as well, but you could probably guess the upgrades for the skill trees are pretty weak. For example, my favorite style was water. Water style is the counter for the shielded enemies. This means that when I'm in the water stance and I hit shield enemies with my heavy attacks, their guard wears down much faster until it breaks, leaving them wide open. One of the best moves in the game is gotten down the water stance skill tree. You hold the input after a heavy attack and then rapidly push it again for a flurry of damaging attacks. I got so much mileage out of this move, not only against shielded enemies, but also everything else. Since the attacks came out so fast, it would break just about any enemy's guard, along with just being a hard-hitting attack. This is the only stance-specific move that I found any major use for. I guess the kick in the wind stance was useful in a handful of situations, but even it had some limits. My point is, I feel like this system doesn't trust the player to actually fight the different enemies with skill. Instead of giving us stances that don't really change all that much, you should instead make more inputs that do specific moves. Like, instead of bloating 4 separate movesets that don't do anything substantial besides house a few attacks that actually make a difference, maybe map the moves that matter to separate input combinations. Why not have a spinning kick move that damages brutes on the triangle and circle buttons? And have a heavy downward strike that damages spearmen on X and square? Because as it stands, the new animations we get from the 4 stances are cool, but they don't really service the gameplay. They don't change anything. And as soon as I saw what kind of moves the water stance would give me, I made a beeline for it. I am all about high risk, high reward in action games. And with that, I'm going to give this game the same criticism I give pretty much every action game. When information isn't conveyed in a timely manner, it can be very frustrating. Meaning that if you're going to have all these different attacks that are expected to be countered in special specific ways, you need to make sure the player knows how to quickly identify and execute it every time. If you look at Sekiro, they have the kanji system. I think it works fine even if they get it wrong by not distinguishing sound or color if the attack needs to be stomped, jumped, dodged, etc. This makes it very difficult to decide what to do in the fraction of a second your brain has to identify and react correctly. Tsushima makes about the same amount of progress as Sekiro, surprisingly. All attacks that are unblockable have a sound cue and a red glint. Now, you can eventually unlock the ability to parry some of the previously unblockable attacks, and the glint changes from red to blue. This is good. It conveys that this attack can now be countered, but it's also a culprit of the same mistakes. Moves that can't be sidestepped, red glint. Moves that can be jumped over but not directly, you kind of have to be to the right a little bit, but you'll figure it out, red glint. Moves that still can be sidestepped, red glint. Arrow shots, no red glint, but a sound cue. All of these enemies could have a couple of these moves, use them at random intervals within the same battle. Oh, and these big cannon guys that have very damaging shotgun blasts, but it's not that bad because they don't have any attacks that can be parried. None of these things would be a problem if the attacks would just have unique sound cues or a uniquely colored glint, but they're all the same. Thus, all this information is a little cumbersome to manage all at once, and it's not that I think the game was unfair or anything, but having these unique cues could lead to much faster and more organized encounters, with the multitude of attacks now telegraphed. No, I played through this one on hard and didn't have too much of a problem in any particular area. I died plenty, but it was because I was being reckless, or because the camera was being a headache. There's no lock-on feature, which I never got used to. The camera is in constant need of adjustment and is rarely ever in a good position for very long. But I would say the actual challenge was decent. The game is a little strict when it comes to your timing for perfect parries and even getting out of the rhythm for enemy attacks, cause boy did I get my ass handed to me a couple of times real quick. There were some times when I swear the inputs were just not being registered, or at least delayed. And I hate sounding like that player, but here, like right here in the final fight, spoilers, I guess, I swear to you all, I was trying to throw out light attacks right here, but it just wasn't happening. Maybe it's the way the game cues inputs, and I was just missing the timing? I don't know. I noticed that a few times throughout my playthrough though. It never got too frustrating since death is already such a slap on the wrist overall. Well, okay, a slap on the wrist that takes forever. The one-on-one duels would definitely be where the biggest challenges lie. I had to restart them the most, but I also enjoyed them the most. They were the ultimate test of your skills because it takes away your additional items and weapons. You have two different types of bows that each have a special type of arrow unique to them, fire and explosion. I don't quite agree with having to swap bows to shoot another type of arrow, but I won't lose sleep over it. You have a smoke bomb that you can use as cover or clean out the remaining enemies with the advantage. You have some explosives that I never really sought out because they were kind of one note. But the coolest item was the kunai. After I fully upgraded it, I could just take out enemy after enemy. And it was unblockable, so it just melted bosses. Plus, it was a very fast way to fill up your ghost stance meter, which can be activated after so many enemies are killed without taking damage. Or you can brutalize a captain for instant access. It basically just lets you get 3 free kills and then turns off. It was kinda lame. It's a good thing the missions, or tails, picked up the remaining slack. I may not have played them all, but Tsushima's open world does a pretty good job at letting you go and do what you want. When I saw something that caught my eye, I would go check it out, but again, this is nothing new for open world games. I was very pleased with some of the lengthier missions. The tale of Sensei Ishikawa and Tomoe was a cool side story to be a part of, especially since you get to see how much of a playa Jin is.
My bait never changes.
What do you use?
The illusion of opportunity.
There's your problem. That only works on men.
This way, my lord. The weather's getting worse. Stay close.
If I get any closer, we'll have to share a horse.
What was that?
Never mind. Keep going.
My, you're horny.
The mythic tales were probably my favorite side missions in the game. Well, okay, the first two anyway. They all involved Jin chasing some old legend to him told by a musician or somebody else, and the first two were so cool because they ended with these huge spectacles. I admittedly enjoyed the platforming challenges of the shrines, even if it was just another identical to every other game climbing system. But it has a grappling hook, so I'm obligated to love it. Sorry, I don't make the rules. And since we're talking about it, the grappling hook didn't have to be in this game at all, but I'm glad it is. There is nothing it does that couldn't be accomplished by giving us some more rocks to climb on, but this is just a million times better. But allow me to get back on my bullshit once more. Why could the hook not be used in combat? I would have lost my mind, man! We could have used it for some wide sweeping attack, or maybe to snatch the enemy's weapon, or pull them in for a good old slashing. Okay, alright, I'm done being nitpicky about the combat now, I'm sorry. But the grappling hook is still so bueno! As far as the narrative goes, it was okay. The main story didn't really strike any chords with me. I never became attached to any of the characters, especially not Jin. I know he's supposed to be a stoic samurai, but does that mean you have to be so boring in every line? He gets some moments of emotion, but that's either very brief or in these recycled animations that play when the world is loading. Ryuzo, Jin's childhood friend and rival, had a much more satisfying set of events to watch, and whoever portrayed him had a great performance right here.
Open the gate! Open the gate!
Kudos, my guy. The side quest chain involving Jin's family caretaker Yuriko made me tear up at the end, so she's obviously not feeling well and is weak, but asks that you continue spending the day with her. Towards the end of the last quest, she starts calling you by your father's name, and Jin just goes with it, realizing she's succumbing to her age. It's so touching that he's describing the world to her one last time before she peacefully passes away. But that and the events prior to the final boss were the only times I really felt something.
Our final day together. It is beautiful.
Other than that, it was good. Nothing bad, but nothing great. You know, I would be a complete jerk to say this game is nothing less than amazing. But then again, most AAA games are amazing. But amazing doesn't always equate to unique. You have played Ghost of Tsushima before, just like you've played Horizon Zero Dawn, Shadow of Mordor, Spider-Man, Assassin's Creed. The formula has been proven yet again. So, if this is the kind of game that resonates with you, then I say it's absolutely worth your time. The small steps it takes to set itself apart from its contemporaries, like the wind system, are cool, but there are still a lot of the same hangups that come with the template in general. The art direction and environments are worth the price of admission alone, punctuating the fact that this is the only game I have ever spent any time in photo mode. I just couldn't help myself. Trying to get those amazing looking shots is really fun, and it's also the reason this video will have the prettiest thumbnail of my catalog. That is until Nick and Elliot decides to draw me one. Hey boys, talking to you, love you. Stealth has been done before in every other way. Combat is passable with lots of cool stuff and moves given to you at a steady rate as the game progresses. But these are more often than not just bloated extra variations that don't really change anything substantially. And those bloated move pools are likely kept relatively similar as to not alienate a casual gamer who might be overwhelmed by more intricate systems. The story is alright and has glimmers of excellence here and there, but only shows signs of real heart sporadically. This world is great for completionists and open world enthusiasts, but you might want to think twice if you grow weary of this formula quickly. But anyway, I appreciate you very much for watching. So thanks for stopping by and have a great day.